Can you imagine getting taken over by a foreign ideology that you can't even explain?
I'm from Denmark. This is a cast which is entirely Nordic, therefore has some lack of diversity.
Now he's immediately lost the argument because he's specifically talking about Hollywood award ceremonies. And yes, Danish people, not very diverse in Denmark. But America, not exactly known for its significant Danish population as far as I'm aware.
What
Hollywood.
are you on to?
Yeah, sorry, but
From the get-go.
Now Mikkelsen plays this like an absolute boss the entire way through. The director, not so much. Now this whole thing is framed around Hollywood and their award ceremonies, but I find it far more interesting how he pitches diversity, as if it's this innate moral good that you just have to have. And if you don't have it, then you're less moral than somebody that does.
rules of diversity across the Atlantic. You don't live up to these standards with this broadcast.
But I guess it doesn't really matter.
Even by saying that these are standards that you need to live up to, he's implying that that is sort of a moral imperative. It comes above everything. It doesn't matter how good your movie is or how profitable it is. No, what matters most are these Hollywood standards. It's almost as if you're talking about wiping out an entire town and you're like, well, what about it? It's like, you wiped out a town. Just stating that you don't have it seems to be all the explanation that he thinks he needs.
It's not because of artistic reasons, it's because of lack of diversity. This can't compete. Are you worried about that?
Are you?
Now Nicholson played a blinder here because the insinuation is obvious. Someone's a racist. It's either the people making the movie or it's Hollywood. Pick one. And considering he's already said that Hollywood has the standards that you need to live up to, I think we know which side the journalist is on.
Get out! You stupid!
But he also backed them into a corner with this question. If you say you are worried about it, then you care about those standards, and so why didn't you put it into your movie? It must be that you're so bigoted that you'll cut your nose off to spite your face. And if you say you're not worried about it, well now you committed sacrilege. Rob Schneider has come out and said that the ideology is like a religion. If you dare oppose any of it, or question it, you're a heretic. And so loaded questions like these come with a threat attached. If you say the wrong thing, you'll never work in Hollywood again. By firing the question back at the journalist, he puts him on the same problem. He either has to say that he has a problem with Danish people, or he has to commit sacrilege against his own sacred cow.
Putting us on the spot, so
Yeah,
you
sure.
answer the
Yeah, no
question.
big-
Spoiler alert, he doesn't answer the question.
It's afraid. It's afraid!
This entire interview was meant to be a setup for them, and the moment they asked him to actually defend or explain his own belief system, he couldn't. Because he knows as much as anybody else, the moment he starts trying to explain it, he's going to come across as a massive bigot. Of course, that didn't stop Mikkelsen from pushing further to get an answer.
In comparison, Parasite was a great
What do you
movie.
think?
I was thinking that Parasite was a great movie.
He goes on to say that he thinks Parasite is a great movie, but because it was South Korean, it was eligible for the awards. Whereas this coming from Denmark won't be. And some people have said that the journalist is criticising Hollywood at this point. He never does. At no point does he make a moral judgment. He doesn't say that the Hollywood standards are wrong. He simply says it's a conundrum.
And that's what I think is a little bit conundrum.
In other words, he's simply saying there's a problem between your artistic vision and what you have to do to live up to the standards of Hollywood. It would have taken 2 seconds to go, it's really stupid because under these standards, you could actually remove the best movie of the year from your awards and give it to a worse performing movie. And that directly goes against the entire point of an awards ceremony. And yet I would say that he didn't, because just like Hollywood, if you think that a diverse cast is the peak moral thing that you can have in a movie, then any movie that doesn't have it, by definition, can't be the best movie in the first place. So you completely knock out the idea of not having it at all. Instead, it simply becomes a question of how can you make it work within the movie you want to make. There is no other option. That is the conundrum.
I don't understand the question.
Okay.
That's because there was no question. What you had was an insinuation. And also, a very strange obsession with America in the first place. Like, this is a Danish movie with a Danish cast and a Danish journalist asking about it, and he decides to talk about American award ceremonies and how you're going against a Californian moral system. If that doesn't show you've been taken over by a foreign ideology, I don't know what does. But what was even stranger was him putting award ceremonies up as if they're the thing that everybody should be aiming for with a movie, rather than, making a good movie so that you actually get the audience in and make money. As strange a concept as that might be for Hollywood nowadays.
Are you taking the piss?
Because if we check out how the award ceremonies are doing, it is not good, as the BAFTAs have to fold in children's awards into the main film and TV events due to a consistent drop in entries and engagement. If you're trying to run a prestigious award ceremony handing out trophies to movies that cost hundreds of millions of dollars, All I'm saying is it may be a little bit tarnished if your next award, it goes to the Teletubbies. What's your next one, Steve? Well, it's Bill and Ben, the Flower Pot Men, and to present the award, Tom Cruise. I don't think anybody would be happy in that scenario, and I can't help wondering if it's slightly related that you find out there's a consistent drop in entries and engagement for the BAFTA Awards that happens in 2023, when in June 2020, they came out with their own policies about inclusion, although they'd had policies like this since 2016. And it does make me laugh when they say, as a champion of creative excellence, we want all talented people to be able to succeed, but only if you meet our very strict criteria. You hypocritical arsehole. I'm not even offended that you're lying, it's just how little you try and hide it that gets me. I'd say he brought it up because that is the top-down institution from which they can enforce their moral judgment across all the common plebs. And so he just comes at them from the other side, says diversity a few times, and then dares them to say anything against it. I'm gonna pin you between a rock and a hard place and watch you squirm, which is why he squirmed the moment they asked him the same question back. But while Mikkelsen didn't really take it very seriously, the director on the other hand just capitulated.
Well, first of all, the film takes place in Denmark in the 1750s.
At first it seems like a decent enough answer, but it is a defensive one, rather than taking issue with the question in the first place like Mikkelsen did. Instead, you're defending it while going, well, that's not really a problem for us because this simply didn't happen in history. But you also imply that at any other point in history, you would have changed it because you also agree that it is a moral good to do so. It's also not like the history excuses even worked in the past before, when they decided to change Anne Boleyn, and places like the Smithsonian Magazine decided to say that the controversy overdoing it was unnecessary and harmful. All of that harm that was done by saying that something should be historically accurate. History itself is now harmful because it disagrees with our newfangled value system. The article even goes on to talk about racist overtones from the people who were just saying she should look like she did in history, as this is a real-life person that existed, despite the fact that the bigots were definitely the ones in casting, when according to this article they even admitted that they didn't practice colourblind casting, no, instead they adopted an identity-conscious approach when it chose the stars. In other words, they specifically chose somebody who didn't look like they did in history. How did you go about hiring for that one? Was it somebody who couldn't go 30 seconds without using a slur? Even goes on to talk about, we didn't look at what society might perceive as the right look for the job. Because now what society perceives is history, is it? You are aware of what reality is, right? But no, the people that think everything is a social construct now think that that is all of history. If we all get together and think that the human species popped out of a McDonald's carton last week, that'll be a fact. They're really not sending their best in these kind of arguments. Although my favourite part of the entire thing, because other adaptations have also not been historically accurate, including one where they didn't make Henry VIII fat. Yeah, mate, I mean, those are basically the same thing. I completely agree with you. I take it all back. You've convinced me. But then the director makes it worse and basically gives in to the journalist and everything he was after.
We do have a big plot line about a girl of color.
Rather than confronting the accusation as a problem, you're simply agreeing that he would be right to bring it up, and that's why you've already built that into the movie. Again, you can see that the journalist wasn't criticizing the award ceremonies at all or their values, because this satiates him.
In the 1750s.
That's also what I was portraying.
And you have now bowed down to the cult and gone, no, we do have this anyway because we think it's important. Even in this incredibly unlikely situation, we did find one person that we could put in there.
Which was very rare, any people of color in Denmark and
Yes.
almost nobody.
Because we think that's necessary. And let's face it, the main response to questions like that should generally just be laughing in their faces. Can make him feel very awkward and get the rest of the room laughing at his face. It will reduce those questions in the future when they realise the rest of the world doesn't actually share your Californian moral system. Oh, what's that? You want to insinuate and insult people. Also, they'll back down and capitulate to your will? Yeah, we're not going to do that today. In fact, the moment Mikkelsen flipped the question around and the guy couldn't actually defend what he wanted at all, just started talking about a different movie.
So you answer the question.
big
What do you
movie.
think?
I was thinking that Parasite was a great movie.
That is when they should have pushed.
And that's what I think is a little bit conundrum.
Even the way he delivers the questions are a little bit hesitant. Well, you know, this movie is eligible for him and this one isn't, and this is a little bit of a conundrum. Are you concerned about this?
That this can't compete in that competition. Are you worried about that?
Are you?
It's interesting because even if he is unsure about it, he's still willing to go around and be the social enforcer of the Hollywood belief system. No, explain your things. Like, why should we be obeying those in the first place? Why is it important? Why are you saying that a Danish movie has too many Danish people in it? Why do you have a problem with Danish people? It was the perfect opportunity to start interrogating him, because he really strikes me as somebody who's just taken on an outlook and doesn't know why. He knows the buzzwords, but likely wouldn't be able to defend any of them. And I don't think there's another word except capitulation for what the director did, because at the end he goes, well, it would be weird if it didn't look historically accurate, given that this is meant to be.
I think it would be a little weird, just a historical, how it was in the 1750s.
Even though he admits that the one person they found for Hollywood ideals was probably the only person in the entire country.
She was probably at the time the only one in the entire country of Denmark.
So yes, it would look weird if it wasn't historically accurate, but it's also a bit weird if you meet the only person in the entire country that just happens to make California happy. That is one hell of a coincidence, so must have been something they considered when they were making the movie in the first place. Despite this being a Danish production full of Nordic folk, they were still dominated by Hollywood values as they were making the movie. And why? Well, it's all about the award ceremonies. The journalist knew that. That's why he brought them up as the pressure point to begin with.
Rules of diversity across the Atlantic. You don't live up to these standards with this cast.
And I think the question is, why would you even be concerned about that in the first place? Awards don't give you money. Awards don't make your movie a success. And the award ceremonies themselves are failing anyway. And we've seen from things like the Ripperverse, doing 3.7 million for his first campaign, and 2.3 million for his second one, that you don't need these award ceremonies in the first place. You don't need these institutions to tell you what to do. And I'm sure someone will come back with the argument and go, well, this is 3.7 million. That's nothing like the numbers Hollywood pulls with its movies. And I'd be like, yes, but the Ripperverse comic did actually make a lot more profit, because The Flash may have pulled in 268 million, but it was still the worst box office flop in DCU history. But according to the director, it had a production budget of 200 million and a marketing budget of 200 million. It didn't even manage to break even, just ignoring the cut that all the cinemas take. But that is the problem with all these centralized institutions. We've seen it with the strikes with the actors and writers unions. Despite the fact that the studios came back and gave them a good offer, the union went, no, we want this very specific thing of minimum writers' rooms. Despite the fact that I'm sure many of those members would have gone, I'd just like to work now, please. That's giving me a raise. Individually, some people definitely would have taken that offer, but because everybody's tied into an institution, now nobody has any power. Instead, you've got this giant behemoth which is using its position to just lord it over everybody and force them to comply.
We are union through and through, all the way to the end.
I am Locutus of Borg.
The fact that a Danish journalist would raise as a problem the fact that a Danish movie could be too Danish is farcical, but that is how far this fake prestige has actually spread. What, I'm not going to go up for an award that I probably won't even win? Oh, the horror. It's not going to make your movie make any more money, but it could give you as a director a bit more of a shine and improve your career in the future. That gives them a built-in incentive to change their story from what it would be, the best version of it, and adapt it specifically for Hollywood. That's why they went out and found the one person who probably existed in the entire country and went, well, they've got to be in the movie.
She was probably at the time the only one in the entire country of Denmark.
Not because it enhanced the plot, not because it improved the story, not because it made a better movie, but because they felt like they had to, if they wanted to get along in Hollywood. Is it any wonder that the quality of entertainment has gone down when that's the rules that you're living under? It's the same as the minimum writers' rooms. The more people are in the room, the more people will point and go, well, that's a problem, I'm offended by that, you've got to change that, and they ruin everything. You can't create a good product in a straitjacket, and yet that is what California is doing to everybody else making movies in the rest of the world. And as far as I'm concerned, the only response should be that of Mikkelsen's.
So
Yeah,
you
sure.
answer the
Yeah, no,
question.
big-
What do you think? I don't understand the question.
Okay.
Make them explain themselves, because they won't be able to do it without coming across as a massive bigot. But those are just my thoughts. What are yours? Let me know down in the comments below. Like the video if you like the video. Subscribe for more videos like this in the future, and I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.